Everyone expected humiliation, but the moment he sang, jaws dropped and whispers died. The superstar smirked, but then something impossible happened that changed everything. "Don't be shy, little man. Show the world why you belong on this stage." Vivienne Starr's voice dripped honey through the Apollo Theater speakers. 1,200 guests craned their necks, 3.5 million viewers leaned into their screens. Malik Thompson, 8 years old, tugged at his hand-me-down blue shirt that hung 2 sizes too big. I'm honored, Miss Starr." She looped an arm around his shoulders, manicured nails digging into his collarbone. Her smile never wavered. "Let's see if you can keep up, sweetheart. Band, give him Ascension. The note that made me a legend." She leaned close, her microphone tilted away, but his clip-on mic caught every word. "Fail quietly, baby. The world's watching." The spotlight burned. The audience held its breath. What Malik did next didn't just silence the room. It shattered the lie she'd been lip-syncing for a decade. Before we go into the story, welcome, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, let us know what part of the world you are watching from. Now let's continue the story. 6 hours earlier, Malik had stood at the entrance of that same Apollo Theater, subway tokens still jingling in his coat pocket. He lived in a rent-controlled walk-up in Harlem with his grandmother, a woman whose knuckles were swollen from 30 years scrubbing floors at St. Luke's Hospital. Their apartment had 3 rooms, her bedroom, his closet-sized room, and a kitchen where the gas stove clicked 4 times before the flame caught. His grandmother worked the 4 a.m. to noon shift, came home smelling like bleach and exhaustion, then slept through the afternoon while Malik reheated beans and rice on that temperamental stove. Money was never discussed. It was just there, in the way his grandmother counted coins before buying eggs, in the way Malik wore the same jeans until the knees blew out, in the way she smiled when he asked for new sneakers and said, "Your feet ain't done growing yet, baby." Malik had been singing since he was 5, standing on the subway platform at 125th Street waiting for his grandmother's train. The acoustics in those tiled tunnels made every sound echo twice, the screech of brakes, the rumble of the express, the hum of 1,000 strangers moving too fast to look at each other. He sang to fill the space. Blues standards his grandmother played on a scratched Etta James CD. Gospel runs from the Sunday service at Abyssinian Baptist. Soul riffs he'd heard bleeding through apartment walls. By 7, the station manager, Mr. Kovacs, had pulled his grandmother aside after her shift. "Your boy's got something. Perfect tone, perfect pitch. I've heard 1,000 subway singers. He's different." His grandmother had smiled, bone-tired. "What am I supposed to do with that?" "Juilliard. Vocal training. He could go professional." She'd paused at the turnstile. "That cost money we ain't got." So Malik sang in the tunnels. He sang in the stairwell of their building where the sound bounced off concrete. He sang in his tiny room at night, quietly, teaching himself Aretha Franklin runs from YouTube videos on his grandmother's cracked screen phone. His range was unusual, a 2-chest voice to E5 head voice, with a raw grit that sounded like he'd lived 100 years longer than his 8. He didn't know this was rare. He just knew it felt like the only true thing he owned. When the letter came saying Malik had won the Seat with a Star contest, one of 50,000 entries, his grandmother had cried. Not happy tears. Worried tears. "This ain't for kids like us, Malik." But she'd taken him anyway, smoothing down his too big blue shirt that morning, the thrift store tag still visible on the inside collar because she'd forgotten to cut it off. Vivienne Starr had a system. 3 minutes before her spontaneous audience interaction segment, her assistant would scan the front rows with a practiced eye. The goal was simple: find the least threatening child possible. Not the pretty one in the designer dress whose mother clearly hired a stylist. Not the confident kid bouncing in their seat, hand already raised. Find the one who looked like they'd never been picked for anything. This is what predators do. They don't choose equals. They choose contrast. Malik sat in seat C12, fourth row center. His grandmother had ironed his blue shirt 3 times that morning, but the fabric still bunched at the shoulders. His sneakers had a split along the left sole, held together with superglue that hadn't quite dried. He'd been chosen for the Seat with a Star program, but looking around at the Apollo Theater's velvet seats and crystal chandeliers, he felt like a typo in someone else's sentence. Vivienne's assistant, a woman named Simone with a clipboard that cost more than Malik's grandmother made in a week, walked the rows during the pre-show sound check. She had a checklist, unspoken but absolute: no kids who looked too polished. No kids whose parents might have lawyers. Find the one who'll be grateful just to be seen. She stopped at Malik. Took a photo with her phone. Sent it to Vivienne with 3 words: perfect. Won't overshadow. This is the economics of humiliation. Vivienne's last album had underperformed. Streaming numbers revealed what her team had been digitally masking for 2 years: her upper register was gone. The E5 she'd built her career on now cracked at D5. Her processors could fix studio recordings, but live performances were becoming a problem. She needed a narrative reset. A mentor moment where she discovered raw talent, reminded the world that she was still the standard. But the talent had to be controllable. Grateful. Unthreatening. Malik fit the algorithm perfectly. When the lights went down and the show began, Vivienne performed her opening number flawlessly, because it was pre-recorded. The audience didn't know. They never do. Her lips synced perfectly to a vocal track she'd recorded 18 months ago, before the nodules on her vocal cords became irreversible. Then came the moment. She scanned the crowd as if seeing them for the first time. Her eyes landed on Malik. The spotlight followed. The cameras zoomed. "You there," she said, her voice warm as poison honey. "The young man in the blue shirt. Come up here, sweetheart." Malik's grandmother squeezed his hand. "Don't go," her grip said. But 1,200 people were watching. 3.5 million more from home. He stood. He walked. And Vivienne smiled, because she'd just done what she always did, found someone small enough to make herself look bigger. Before we dive into how Malik learned to turn subway tunnels into his conservatory, let me ask you something: have you ever been underestimated? Ever had someone look at you and decide you weren't worth their time, until you proved them wrong? This story gets deeper. And darker. And more triumphant than you might expect. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will teach you more about power, manipulation, and the music industry than any documentary ever could. And if you've ever signed something without reading it, the next chapters is going to haunt you. Now, let's rewind 6 years. To a subway platform in Harlem where a 5-year-old boy learned to sing from the screech of steel on steel. Malik learned to sing the way some children learn to swim, by necessity, not choice. At 5 years old, he stood on the northbound platform of the 125th Street subway station every afternoon, waiting for his grandmother to emerge from the downtown 2 train after her hospital shift. The wait was always 40 minutes. Sometimes longer if the trains ran late. This is where talent often begins, in the gaps. The spaces between exhaustion and home. The minutes that need filling. The 125th Street station had acoustics that engineers call cathedral reverberation. The tiled walls, the arched ceilings, the long tunnels created a natural echo chamber. Street musicians knew this. They'd set up near the turnstiles, their guitar cases open, playing for commuters who moved too fast to stop but slow enough to drop quarters. Malik didn't have a guitar. He had his voice. He started by mimicking the screech of brakes on steel rails. He could match the pitch exactly, turning industrial noise into melody. The three-note chime of closing doors. The rumble of an express train that never stopped, its sound deepening as it passed. Perfect pitch isn't learned. It's discovered. Malik discovered his by accident, turning the subway into his first teacher. His grandmother noticed on a Tuesday. She came up the stairs, bone-tired, and heard someone singing Etta James's At Last. Clean tone. Perfect phrasing. She thought it was a recording until she saw her grandson, eyes closed, singing to no one and everyone. She didn't stop him. She understood something crucial: the boy was filling a silence that would otherwise swallow him. At night, in their apartment where the walls were thin enough to hear three families' conversations at once, Malik would lie in his narrow bed and listen. The couple upstairs played Motown on Friday nights. The woman next door sang gospel while cooking Sunday dinner. The man at the end of the hall played saxophone, badly, but with enough soul that Malik learned to separate intention from execution. This is the education poverty provides: you learn from everything because you can't afford to learn from nothing. His grandmother had a CD player. One CD. Etta James's At Last album, scratched so badly it skipped on track 4. Malik learned every song, every run, every breath. He didn't know he was training his ear. He thought he was just keeping his grandmother company while she soaked her swollen feet. By 7, he could hear a note and name it. A 2. F sharp. B flat. Mr. Kovacs, the station manager who'd worked at 125th for 30 years, tested him one day. Played notes on his phone app. Malik named all 12 chromatic pitches without error. Kid's got software in his head, Kovacs told his grandmother. She smiled. Tired. Proud. Worried. Software we can't afford to upgrade. The Apollo Theater stage is 40 feet wide. Under the lights, it feels like 400. Malik stood at center, his clip-on microphone picking up the sound of his own heartbeat. Vivienne handed him a second microphone, a Shure SM58, industry standard, the kind that costs $100 and lives in every professional's kit. What Malik didn't know, this microphone was running through Vivienne's personal processing rig. Compression. Auto-tune. A subtle frequency cut at 3 kHz that would make any voice sound thin. This is how you rig a game. You don't announce the rules. You just change them. Vivienne's band started playing Ascension, her signature ballad. The one that climbs from G4 to E5 in the final chorus. The note she hadn't hit live in 2 years. The crowd recognized the opening chords. They cheered. This was the moment they'd paid for. Vivienne sang the first verse. Flawless. Pre-recorded track, her lips moving in perfect sync. Then she turned to Malik. Your turn, sweetheart. Let's see what you've got. Malik closed his eyes. He'd heard this song before, on the radio, in stores, everywhere. But he'd never sung it. He didn't know the melody in his bones the way he knew Etta James, the way he knew the gospel songs from Abyssinian Baptist, the way he knew the blues his grandmother hummed while cooking. So he did what every real musician does when handed someone else's song: he made it his. He ignored the pop melody. He found the hymn underneath. He opened his mouth and sang a soulful, gritty reinterpretation that turned Ascension into a spiritual. His voice was raw, no processing, no polish, just an 8-year-old boy who'd learned to sing in subway tunnels and understood that music is truth before its performance. The note he hit wasn't E5. It was E-flat 5, bent and blue, with a resonance that made the front row feel it in their chests. Vivienne's face froze. Not because he'd failed. Because he'd succeeded in a way she couldn't manufacture. This is the moment every fraud fears, when authenticity reveals the costume. The audience didn't applaud. They gasped. Then silence. Then a standing ovation that built like thunder. Vivienne stood beside Malik, her smile locked in place, her brain calculating damage control. The cameras were live. 3.5 million people had just witnessed an 8-year-old child out-sing a superstar on her own signature song. Her microphone was still on when she leaned close. "You just made a very expensive mistake, little man." But Malik's microphone was on too. And 3.5 million people heard her say it. Malik's grandmother didn't read contracts. She read hospital charts, prescription labels, bus schedules. When Vivienne's assistant Simone appeared backstage holding a clipboard and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she spoke in the language predators always use, urgency wrapped in generosity. "This is just a standard participation waiver. Everyone who comes on stage signs it. For insurance purposes. This is how legal traps work. They hide in plain sight, disguised as bureaucracy." The document was 8 pages. Simone flipped to page 7. A signature line. An X marked in pencil. Malik's grandmother held a pen that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She was still shaking from watching her grandson on that stage, still processing the applause, still thinking this might change everything. She signed, Dorothy Thompson, in her careful, slanted cursive. What she didn't read, Clause 14, subsection C, page 4. Artist grants exclusive representation rights to Star Entertainment LLC for a period of 10 years, including but not limited to, recording rights, performance rights, image rights, and derivative works. Clause 19, page 6, any breach of exclusivity will result in financial penalties not to exceed $500,000 or artist's total earnings, whichever is greater. This wasn't a waiver. It was a deed of ownership. Entertainment law operates in a space most people never see. A standard contract between equals might be 3 to 4 pages. A predatory contract targeting someone unsophisticated. 8 pages minimum. Dense language. Cross-references. Legal terms that sound protective but function as shackles. Malik's grandmother signed because she trusted the smile. Because Simone had said everyone signs it. Because she was tired and overwhelmed and didn't want to be difficult. Because she didn't know that difficult is what lawyers call people who read the fine print. Simone took the clipboard. "Congratulations, Dorothy. Malik's going to be a star." 3 hours later, a PDF of the contract arrived at Vivienne's legal team's office. Her lawyer, Marcus Chen, Yale Law, $800 an hour retainer, smiled when he read Clause 14. He'd written it himself. The trick was making the predatory seem protective. Exclusive representation sounded like an opportunity. Like someone was investing in Malik. Like this was mentorship. It wasn't. It was a cage with a lock that wouldn't click shut until Dorothy Thompson tried to walk away. By midnight, Star Entertainment had filed the contract with the New York County Clerk's office. Public record. Legal and binding. Malik's voice now belonged to a corporation. His grandmother had traded her signature for what she thought was gratitude. This is the education poverty denies, knowing when someone is helping you versus owning you. Dorothy Thompson would learn the difference in 72 hours, when Vivienne's team sent the first invoice, $50,004, brand management services, Malik never requested and couldn't refuse. The appearance was scheduled for 11:35 p.m. on The Monroe Show, the late-night program that built careers and buried reputations with equal efficiency. Vivienne wore Valentino, a crimson dress that cost $12,000, the color of controlled fury. Her makeup artist had worked for 90 minutes to make her look casually flawless. Her media trainer had prepped her for 2 hours. This is crisis management. When you can't change the story, you change the narrator. Monroe Blake, the host, had been briefed. Vivienne's publicist had sent talking points in a 6-page document. The angle: Malik was a disrespectful child who'd ruined a charity moment. The subtext: he was ungrateful, possibly manipulated by stage parents, definitely not the organic talent the video suggested. So, Vivienne, Monroe said, leaning forward with practiced concern, that moment with the young boy at the Apollo has gone incredibly viral. 20 million views in 48 hours. But I understand there's more to the story. Vivienne's smile was surgical. Monroe, I love discovering new talent. That's why I do these charity events. But what people didn't see is that Malik was coached backstage by someone, I don't know who, to ignore the arrangement, to showboat, to make it about him instead of the moment. This is the anatomy of a smear. You don't attack directly. You plant doubt. You imply conspiracy. You make the victim look calculated. And the audio people are hearing? Monroe asked. Your voice telling him he made a mistake. Taken completely out of context. I was trying to gently correct him, to teach him that professionalism matters. The microphone caught half a conversation. What you didn't hear is me saying, you just made a very expensive mistake not following the chart, little man. I was teaching him about studio etiquette. The lie was elegant. Plausible. Delivered with the wounded tone of someone misunderstood. Then came the kill shot. And honestly, Monroe, our audio engineers have analyzed the recording. There's evidence of pitch correction software in Malik's vocal track. Someone processed his voice in real time to make him sound better than he actually is. This wasn't organic talent. This was a digital trick designed to embarrass me. This is advanced character assassination. Accuse your accuser. Flood the zone with competing narratives. Make people question what they saw with their own eyes. The interview aired. By 2 a.m., #MalikHoax was trending. By morning, think pieces appeared, Are We Being Manipulated by Viral Talent Videos, and The Dark Side of Child Performers. Vivienne's publicist had seeded 12 stories across 8 media outlets. Malik's grandmother saw the clips on her phone during her 4 a.m. bus ride to the hospital. She didn't understand half the words: pitch correction, digital manipulation, stage parents. But she understood the tone. They were calling her grandson a liar. She called in sick for the first time in 7 years. Not because she was ill. Because she needed to figure out how to fight a war she didn't know she'd entered. Pause for a second. Because what you just witnessed, that's not fiction. That's the actual playbook. Vivienne just went on national television and convinced millions of people that what they saw with their own eyes was fake. She turned a moment of genuine talent into a conspiracy theory. And it worked. For 72 hours, Malik Thompson was the villain in his own story. If you're thinking, this is too calculated to be real, you're right. It is calculated. And if you want to understand how public opinion gets manufactured, how narratives get hijacked, and how the powerful rewrite reality in real time, you need to see what happens next. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever seen someone get publicly smeared like this? Have you ever been on the receiving end? Because Chapter 6 is where the ghosts come back to fight. 3 women are about to walk into Malik's life. Women Vivienne thought she'd silenced forever. And they're carrying a thumb drive that will burn her empire to the ground. The email arrived on a Tuesday with no subject line. The sender, email protected. The message was 3 sentences: "We know what Vivienne did to your grandson. We know because she did it to us. Meet us at Morningside Park, North Bench, 3 p.m. Come alone." Malik's grandmother didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in patterns. She'd worked in hospitals long enough to know that predators rarely operated once. She went. 3 women sat on the bench. Black, Latina, white. Ages ranging from late 30s to mid-50s. They wore the invisible uniform of people who'd been close to fame but never touched it, good clothes worn slightly too long, haircuts from salons that cost money but not wealth. The eldest spoke first. Her name was Janine Hooks. "I sang backup for Vivienne from 2012 to 2017. 5-year contract. When it ended, I'd made $180,000 total. She'd made $40 million from albums I sang on. My voice is on 12 tracks across 3 platinum records. I'm credited on none of them. This is how the music industry functions below the spotlight. Session singers, backup vocalists, ghostwriters, invisible labor that makes stars possible." The second woman, Carmen Rodriguez, had been Vivienne's vocal coach from 2015 to 2019. "I taught her the technique she claimed was instinctive. When her nodules developed, I warned her to rest. She fired me and hired a producer who'd use auto-tune instead. Everything you hear on her last 2 albums. Synthesized. Not her voice." The third woman, Rebecca Yates, worked in audio engineering. "I was on the crew for her 2023 tour. Every live show ran through a processing rig that cost $150,000. Real-time pitch correction, harmonic enhancement, frequency optimization. She hasn't sung a pure note in public since 2021. Malik's grandmother listened. These women weren't angry. They were archaeologists, excavating a fraud. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Janine handed her a thumb drive. "Because what she's doing to Malik, she did to us. The contracts. The NDAs. The threats. We all signed them. But you know what Vivienne doesn't know? I kept recordings. Raw studio sessions. Her real voice versus the processed version. Audio engineers call them dry tracks, no effects, no enhancement. Just the truth. This thumb drive contained 47 audio files. Vivienne Starr singing without processors. Missing notes. Cracking on high registers. Struggling through phrases that her albums made sound effortless. "Why now?" Dorothy asked. Rebecca answered. "Because we tried to speak up and got buried by legal teams. But Malik? He's going viral. People are listening. If we release these now, it's not revenge. It's evidence. This is how David beats Goliath. Not through strength. Through coalition. Through people who were silenced finding someone who can't be." Carmen leaned forward. "We can teach Malik how to beat her. Not with processing. With technique. How to expose a fraud when they're standing next to real talent." Dorothy Thompson had cleaned hospital floors for 30 years. She knew how to recognize infection. This wasn't help. This was surgery. "When do we start?" The Authenticity Gala was broadcast from Madison Square Garden with a production budget of $8 million. Vivienne's publicist had orchestrated the concept. Mentor discovers Star narrative where Vivienne would duet with Malik, proving she'd taught him his technique. The subtext, reclaim the story, turn controversy into coronation. This is narrative warfare. When you can't erase the damage, repaint it as intentional. 50 million people tuned in. The stage was designed like a recording studio, glass booth, vintage microphones, exposed cables. The aesthetic was raw authenticity, which cost $200,000 to fabricate. Malik walked out wearing clothes Vivienne's stylist had chosen. Designer jeans, a tailored shirt, shoes that fit. He looked like someone else's idea of a star. His grandmother sat front row, flanked by Janine, Carmen, and Rebecca. They'd spent 2 weeks preparing him. Not teaching him to sing, he already knew how. Teaching him to recognize when someone else wasn't. Vivienne began. The song was her choice, Rise, a ballad designed to showcase her upper register. The arrangement started soft, building to a climax that would require both singers to hit E-flat 5 simultaneously. She sang the first verse. Flawless. Because it was processed through the same rig she'd used for 2 years. Real-time auto-tune, harmonic enhancement, compression that smoothed every rough edge. Malik sang the second verse. Into a microphone he'd inspected backstage with Rebecca's help. Clean signal. No processing. His voice was raw, powerful, unenhanced. The audience heard the difference immediately. Vivienne sounded perfect, digitally airbrushed, every note landing precisely on pitch with zero variation. Malik sounded human, breath, grit, emotion. One voice sounded like music. The other sounded like software. Then came the bridge. The moment where both singers would harmonize. Malik watched Vivienne. Saw her mouth open for the high note. Heard the processed perfection emerge from the speakers. He stopped singing. Just stopped. The band continued. Vivienne continued. But Malik stood silent, letting her processed voice fill the arena alone. Then he walked to the front of the stage. Pulled the microphone from its stand. And unplugged it from the sound system. 50 million people watching. 20,000 in the arena. Complete silence. I want to sing without the machine, Malik said. His voice, unamplified, barely reached the 10th row. This is the nuclear option. Strip away the infrastructure. Make the comparison unavoidable. He sang a cappella. Rise, without accompaniment. His voice was thin without amplification but undeniably real. Every note landed with human imperfection, slight sharpness on the ascent, breathiness on the descent, vibrato that wavered because he was 8 years old and terrified. The crowd heard truth. Then Vivienne tried to follow. She pulled her own microphone free. Attempted the same phrase. She cracked on the 3rd note. Missed the 5th. Couldn't sustain the 6th. Her real voice, without processing, was mediocre. Not bad. Just ordinary. The voice of someone who'd needed technology to bridge the gap between ambition and ability. The cameras captured everything. Her face. The panic. The moment she realized she'd been exposed. The audience didn't boo. They gasped. Then went silent. Then began to leave. The contract Dorothy Thompson signed had 47 clauses. Marcus Chen, Vivienne's lawyer, had drafted it to be airtight, 10 years of exclusive representation, financial penalties for breach, NDAs that prohibited speaking about terms. But entertainment law operates under a principle older than any statute: you can only enforce a contract between real parties. The contract was signed by Dorothy Thompson on behalf of Malik Thompson. The rights were assigned to Star Entertainment LLC. The enforcing party was listed as Vivienne Starr, CEO. Except Vivienne Starr wasn't her legal name. Her birth name was Vivienne Kowalski. She trademarked Vivienne Starr as a stage name in 2008, but never legally changed her identity. Star Entertainment LLC was registered under that trademark. This was the flaw. The loophole that corporate lawyers call entity confusion. Rebecca Yates's brother was a contracts attorney in Newark. He worked for a non-profit legal aid clinic that took pro bono cases. He read the contract in 20 minutes. Smiled on page 4. This contract assigns rights to a corporate entity controlled by a trademark, not a legal person. Vivienne Kowalski can't enforce Vivienne Starr's contracts because she doesn't legally own the trademark as an individual, it's owned by the LLC. And the LLC can't claim damages from Malik because it never suffered any. The contract is void for lack of proper parties. This is the irony of predatory contracts. They're often written so aggressively they collapse under their own weight. The lawsuit was filed in New York County Court 3 days after the Madison Square Garden exposure. Not by Malik's side. By Vivienne's attorneys, claiming breach of contract and demanding $500,000 in damages. The response brief was 12 pages. The summary: defendant cannot be held in breach of a contract with a non-existent legal entity. Star Entertainment LLC has no standing. Vivienne Kowalski has no contract. Motion to dismiss with prejudice. The judge agreed. The case was dismissed. The contract was voided. But the real damage came from discovery. During the 3 weeks the lawsuit was active, Rebecca released the dry tracks to media outlets. 47 audio files of Vivienne singing without processing. Legal to release because they were her voice, and she'd sued first, making her vocal abilities a matter of public legal interest. Music blogs posted comparisons. Processed versus raw. The difference was undeniable. Spotify removed the verified artist badge from her profile. Radio stations stopped playing her singles. Her label, Apex Records, released a statement: "We are re-evaluating our partnership with Ms. Kowalski in light of recent revelations." Within 2 weeks, Vivienne Starr went from superstar to case study. Music schools would teach her story as a cautionary tale: technology can amplify talent, but it can't create it. And when the amplification becomes the entirety of the talent, you're not an artist. You're a product with an expiration date. The Grand Ole Opry doesn't invite children. It's a church of country music, a temple where legends are made, where the stage has held Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton and voices that shaped American sound. The youngest performer in its history was 13. Until Malik Thompson walked out at 8 years old. The invitation came from the Opry's managing director, a man named Samuel Cross who'd seen the Madison Square Garden footage and understood something crucial: authenticity isn't about genre. It's about truth. Malik sang soul and gospel, not country. But he sang it with the same naked honesty that made the Opry matter. This is the power of institutional endorsement. When the establishment validates the outsider, it doesn't just elevate the individual. It challenges its own definition of excellence. Malik stood center stage wearing his own clothes this time. The hand-me-down blue shirt. The jeans with the blown knee. The sneakers held together with superglue. His grandmother sat in the front row wearing her hospital scrubs because she'd come directly from her shift. No band. No processing. No safety net. He sang, "At Last," by Etta James. The song his grandmother played on repeat. The song he'd learned in subway tunnels and their cramped apartment. The song that taught him what it meant to mean what you sing. His voice was still raw. Still imperfect. The vibrato wobbled. The high notes weren't always centered. But every word carried weight. Every phrase felt lived. This is what great singing is. Not technical perfection. Emotional truth delivered through technical competence. The Opry audience, 2,000 people who'd seen every kind of performer, stood halfway through. Not because Malik was flawless. Because he was real. When he finished, the applause lasted 4 minutes. Samuel Cross walked on stage. Handed Malik a framed certificate. Youngest performer in Opry history. But more than that, a reminder of why we built this place. To honor voices that matter. The media coverage shifted. No longer, child exposes fraud. Now, Subway singer redefines talent. The narrative had completed its arc, from victim to symbol. Dorothy Thompson's phone rang with offers. Record labels. Talent agencies. Everyone wanted to represent Malik. She declined them all. Instead, she hired Rebecca's brother to draft a simple document. Malik would sing when he wanted, where he wanted, for people who wanted to hear him. No contracts. No commitments. Just a boy and his voice. This is the lesson: authenticity can't be owned. It can only be offered. 2 years later, Congress passed the Thompson Act, legislation protecting minors from predatory talent contracts. Entertainment law students study it as the case where the system finally protected the vulnerable instead of the powerful. But Malik Thompson doesn't think about legislation. He's 10 now. Still lives in Harlem. Still waits on the 125th Street platform while his grandmother finishes her shift. Still sings in the subway tunnels where the acoustics make every note echo twice. The difference is now people stop. They listen. They remember that before music became an industry, it was just humans making sound that mattered. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. The Thompson Act is real. Well, in this story it is. But here's what's actually real: as of 2024, 37 states in the U.S. still have no comprehensive protections for child performers in digital entertainment contracts. Kids are still signing away rights to their voices, their images, their futures, because their parents don't know they're signing ownership papers disguised as opportunities. Malik's story is fiction. But the predatory contracts, the processed vocals, the smear campaigns, those are pulled straight from industry reality. If this story taught you something, about reading contracts, about recognizing manipulation, about the difference between manufactured talent and authentic artistry, then share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. To a parent with a talented kid. To a young artist trying to navigate an industry built to exploit them. To anyone who's ever been told they should be grateful just to be seen. And if you want more stories that don't just entertain but educate, that pull back the curtain on how power operates, how systems exploit, and how ordinary people can fight back, subscribe. Because every story I tell has a lesson buried in the narrative. Malik Thompson learned to sing in a subway tunnel. Where did you learn your voice matters? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.